Hey, folks, today is Monday, October 1st, 2018. This is Roland Martin Unfiltered, broadcasting live from Los Angeles. In today's show, a community forum on over the weekend in Dallas in the, of course, Botham Jean case. I was there. Our cameras were there as well as I moderated a portion of that session. It got really heated. We'll show you some of that as protesters demanded that DA Faith Johnson charge Amber Geiger, the cop who shot and killed Botham Jean, with murder. We'll show you exactly what took place at that community forum. Also, the Laquan McDonald case continues in Chicago. We'll talk to one of his uncles about Laquan and also the latest in that particular case, as Jason Van Dyke is the cop who was on trial for the murder of Laquan McDonald. Also, folks, on today's show, the focus: did Brett Kavanaugh lie about his drinking habits? That's what the focus seems to be as people continue the pressure as the FBI is investigating now that the White House has allowed them to do so. The question is it a fair investigation if the White House is setting the terms? Also, on today's show, folks, we'll talk about the formerly incarcerated in Florida. 1.6 million people don't have the right to vote. The Advancement Project breaks down how that has impacted African Americans in particular. Again, a packed show for you today. It's time to bring the funk. Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go. All right, folks, over the weekend, I was in Dallas-Fort Worth, first moderating a voter turnout panel for the Fort Worth Tarrant County NAACP. And when I left there, I went to Dallas, where there was a community forum at St. Paul United Methodist Church as it related to the Botham Jean case. He, of course, the 26-year-old man from St. Lucia who was gunned down by Officer Amber Geiger in his own apartment. Now, Jean's birthday was on Saturday. That was one of the reasons why they had the Justice for Botham Jean rally taking place at the church there. It got very heated. Now, as I was driving over there, I'm watching, of course, Roland Martin Unfiltered. We actually streamed the entire forum live. Then I hear Attorney Lee Merritt and Ben Crump saying I was going to be moderating the panel, which I wasn't aware of, but it was okay. Got there in time for the last portion of that. And again, lots of emotion, raw emotion, as people are still angry over the fact that Amber Geiger, it took so long for her to be charged. Now they are demanding DA Faith Johnson to indict her on murder charges.
Yeah, I've got what I think is a quick way. I try to stay pretty well informed on issues, but what I don't understand, and what I think a lot of people don't understand, maybe you can explain to us, just in the process of this killing of this brother. Why was there like 3 days or whatever it was before she was arrested? Why was she able to turn herself in another county than she lives in and then the crime was committed in? And just something very, very basic. Assume everything was reversed. Assume Botham Jean went into an apartment, shot this woman dead, and then said, I was in the wrong place and thought it was mine. Does anybody believe we'd be here with this same thing would have happened? And if that didn't happen, then how is that equal justice?
Okay.
Go ahead. 1 second. 1 second. Go ahead.
On August 10th, 2016, the Next Generation Action Network sent the proposal to City Council in the city of Dallas, and we had a list of demands that went about, and we asked Chief David Brown at the time to end the 72-hour policy. We found out...
Okay, first of all, for folks who don't know, bro, I got it. Explain the 72-hour policy.
Okay, so the 72-hour policy allows the officer to wait. So basically in Amber Geiger's case or whatever, they said that this was an officer-involved shooting. There's a policy that makes her and force them to have to send her home, and they can't speak to her or anything until 72 hours is up. Now, guess what? We know in this process that Dallas Police Association and other associations has to represent her, make sure that her rights is there, and she has also the right to look at whatever she wants to. However, this policy was yet supposed to be ended, and David Johnson actually published this throughout the community and said that this was ended. Well, this past Monday, we found out that he lied to the community. He did not end that policy back in 2016.
Now, one second. Is it a policy of the police department?
It was a policy of the police department.
Or can the city council, because the city council governs the police department.
Yeah, that's what I was
can
going to
the
say.
city council make it clear that will be the policy of the Dallas Police Department, not the chief?
Correct, and that's what I was going to segue into, right? So this is a policy within the Dallas Police Department. But the problem is that no city council stood up and said, why did David Brown lie to us? And that's the reason why the people went down there and shut down the city council chambers, because we have continued to be lied to by the Dallas Police Department and the city council continuously. That's why people like Kiara Saunders is running for city council in Dallas, so that we can have a voice on the city council, so that we don't have people lying to us and being pushed off. We were lied to. That 72-hour policy was supposed to be gone.
But Councilman Fielder, please step up.
Right.
Councilman,
yes.
The question I asked is, the 72-hour policy, do you believe that should not be department policy of DPD?
That's correct. It should not be.
It should not be.
It should not be.
Are you, as a council member, are you going to take this proposal to the city council, put it on the agenda, to formally have the city council make sure this is not the policy of the city of Dallas?
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, no. One second. No. One second. Yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. So.
All right, folks. Again, it was very interesting because what was happening there all throughout. You had State Senator Royce West, who was on the panel. You had a couple of activists. You had a couple of attorneys, but you also had District Attorney Faith Johnson. She is an African-American woman who is the DA up for re-election. She's running on the Republican side against John Creuzot, former judge on the Democratic side. And as we continued the conversation, things got very heated as a group of protesters came down to the front demanding answers specifically of D.A. Johnson.
I got it. What's your question?
Faith, is it that you can't up the charge to murder or that you won't?
No. It's the law.
Okay. One second. Hold on. She asked the question. D.A. Johnson, what's the answer?
The answer is the law is you start with the police who charged it. Hold on.
One second.
No.
She's answering your question.
You answer it, ma'am.
Go ahead.
You asking me to
Go
answer it.
Go ahead.
You asking me to answer, and I'm answering it. And I'm respecting you. The police charged her initially with manslaughter. Now we have the case. It goes to the grand jury. The DA does not charge before it goes to the grand jury. It's already been charged.
You did with Roy Oliver.
I've already said to you all, when this case goes to the grand jury, we are going to educate the grand jury in terms of what are the facts and what's the law. Now it is in the grand jury's hand. The DA does not have the obligation or the responsibility, or do we have the authority at this point to change it? Not at this point, before it goes to the grand jury. We do not have the authority.
Okay, hold on. Let me ask a follow-up question.
Yes.
So since it goes to the grand jury, the police, they've charged her with manslaughter.
That doesn't mean that's what's going to come
So
out of
when
the
it goes to the grand jury,
yes,
the grand jury can consider the evidence, and the grand jury can issue an indictment that could either be manslaughter or murder.
Yes, and we will be presenting the case, and we will be explaining to the grand jury what the law is. That's all we can do. We cannot change a charge at this point.
The pastor of this church, the pastor of this church, I humbly ask you.
What? Just hold up. I'm asking a final question. Just 1 second.
Yes.
When it comes to the grand jury,
yes,
the district attorney presents it to the grand jury.
Yes.
Has the grand jury been in panel? When do you anticipate presenting this case to the Dallas County grand jury?
We do not have a specific date in terms of when the case is going to the grand.
1 second, bro. I got it. So 1 second, bro. So just when you say you don't have a
right,
date.
because the grand jury is a secret proceeding. We do not advertise when a case is going to the grand jury. But the question is, do we want it right or do we want it quick?
We want it now.
And even if we don't have enough evidence for the grand jury to indict, you want it now?
So 1 second. So what you're saying? So 1 second. So what you're saying is 1 second. 1 second. So what you're saying is, first of all, what you're saying is you're going through a data collection process. Once you completed your investigation, then you will then take the case to the grand jury. So, and are you also saying that if you take it early, you may not have all of your evidence?
There you go.
And that will also determine whether it's manslaughter or murder.
That's exactly right.
All right, folks, we want to go to our panel. Michael Brown, he is the former vice chair of the DNC Finance Committee. Also, Avis Jones-DeWeese, leadership strategist, and Eugene Craig. He is the CEO of the Eugene Craig organization. Michael, I want to start with you because, what's interesting here is that we have to understand, I believe, the particulars. And what I was trying to get at there with D.A. Johnson was trying to have her walk through for people the facts in terms of exactly what is required. So, for instance, we know that Amber Geiger, shot and killed Botham Jean. We call it murder. Understandable. But it's actually a homicide. Explain to people from a legal standpoint why the distinction between murder or manslaughter.
Well, first, Roland, thank you for having me. Let me first touch on my confusion with D.A. Johnson's answer to your question. I'm not familiar with the statutes in Dallas County, but it seems to me the police never should have charged her before talking to the DA's office. I don't understand. There should have been a conference first or a discussion, and frankly, folks that watch Law and Order should see that every day too. Again, I don't know the statutes in Dallas County, but there should have been a conversation between the charging officer, his superior, and the DA's office to see what would actually be the charge. Relative to the difference between manslaughter and murder, it has a lot to do with different elements. Elements from intent to predisposition, their mental capacity, whether it's self-defense, for example. Clearly, that was not the case. So I don't know why D.A. Johnson didn't at least say, I understand the rules and what the grand jury has to hear, and she's going to follow the law. But to answer your question, she could have said, this is a murder charge, and I'm going to fight for that. That's all she had to say. Clearly, the rules relative to grand jury are going to present themselves the way they are, but she should have made it clear that she thought this was a murder charge.
And Avis, one of the reasons I was trying to walk through that, because again, for the general public, folks say that was murder, but the reality is you have to establish intent before you can proceed to murder. Absolutely. The first thing I brought up on Saturday was the case of Dante Servin, the off-duty Chicago police officer who shot and killed Rekia Boyd. They went to trial. The judge determined that he was charged with the wrong charge by Anita Alvarez, Cook County State's Attorney Office, and he was set free. Never tried again. One of the points that D.A. Johnson made is that you want to get the indictment right. You don't want to overcharge, undercharge. Many believe that Angela Correa, who prosecuted the George Zimmerman case, many believe that she made a mistake by prosecuting him for murder because you have to establish intent. And so I know folks want justice immediately, but the key is to make sure that Amber Geiger is charged properly.
Absolutely. We need to make sure that we have justice. And as laypersons who aren't familiar with the law, this is not what we do every day, we don't really know the nuances of what really accounts for murder versus manslaughter off the tip of our tongue. But the missing element here is trust. And that's what the problem is here. Because of a history in this country of seeing police officers get away with murder day after day after day after day, there is no trust there. And so I can understand why the community wants answers and is asking all of these questions, and rightfully so, because they do not trust the police, they do not trust the DA, they do not trust that they will have justice for this innocent man murdered in his own home.
Now, what you have had there, Eugene, you've had the officer who killed Jordan Edwards in Balk Springs. He was convicted of murder. The jury, they gave him 15 years. You have another trial that's going on as we speak of a black officer who I believe is in Mesquite, who shot his brother, who survived, who is also on trial. And so you do have cases where this district attorney's office has indeed gone after police officers. I think but the other thing is I learned over the weekend in Dallas, and this is very interesting, is that once an officer is convicted, then the city is indemnified from that. So for instance, in the Jordan Edwards case, I was talking with attorneys there. Because that officer was convicted, the city isn't even bothering talking to his family about a settlement. So in talking with attorneys there, they also say we must be careful not to rush to want somebody tried immediately because that impacts civil cases. And again, all of in terms of the family's ability to be able to sue the city and the officer. And so you have all of these things that are going on, and I absolutely understand the righteous indignation of people, but I do believe it is important that we make sure that the DA's office is doing the full investigation to ensure that Amber Geiger is charged the right charge or indicted or the proper indictment.
Absolutely. What people have to remember is that the system is set up not to necessarily convict police officers, not even to have local or state governments pay. It's to protect the agents of the state and the state itself, i.e. the state being local government or state government. And I agree 100%. The DA wants to get it right. And I think she probably could have communicated that better. But I also think, we're looking at reforming this process along the way. I think that indemnification probably should be an issue that's discussed in this next 30-odd days leading up to Election Day. Secondly, I think, if I'm one of the protesters, I'm asking that DA, how in the hell did you allow bail when that would not have been the same if it was a reverse rule, if we're talking equal justice under the law?
Well, that was certainly one of the issues that came up. Not only that, waiting 3 days before she was even arrested, turning herself in Kaufman County and nearby county as well. So many of those questions were raised, and we can certainly expect folks to keep the pressure on the DA's office when it comes to the Botham Jean case. Also, I want to show you this photo real quick. Guys, do you have the photo? I bumped into Botham Jean's girlfriend, and I sent to, if y'all guys have the photo, please pull it up. And it was very interesting because it reminded me of, her name is Cynthia Alexis Johnson. And it reminded me of the Sandra Bland case. So Cynthia walked up to me and she said, Roland, she said, good to meet you. She said, I want you to know that Botham and I watched your show all the time. And she said, we watched it, we would discuss these topics. And one of the things that she told me was that Botham wanted to one day become the prime minister of St. Lucia. And so she was there, of course, showing her support as well. And so it was just one of those things that, again, when Sandra Bland told her mother that one day she would be on my show, and unfortunately she got on, we were dealing with her death, and the same thing with Botham Jean. So we certainly appreciate him and her watching the show as well. But and we will definitely stay on top of this case, folks, giving you all the latest details and keeping the focus where it needs to be. Now let's shift to Chicago, where today's proceedings in the case of the Jason Van Dyke, the Chicago cop on trial for murder of Laquan McDonald, adjourned because of a sick juror. Now the question is whether or not Jason Van Dyke is going to take the stand to give his perspective on what took place. This case still is a huge issue in Chicago. The defense has tried to make the argument that Laquan McDonald was charging toward Jason Van Dyke. There's nothing that they've shown thus far, frankly, that even supports that. We'll do want to go to an interview now, of course, with the great uncle of Laquan McDonald. He, of course, has been following this case. He is a pastor there as well. And so Marvin Hunter, Reverend Marvin Hunter, welcome to Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hello, Mr. Martin. How are you?
Doing great. First and foremost, how has the family been viewing the defense put forth by the attorneys for Jason Van Dyke?
Well, we feel that the defense has done everything humanly possible to try and paint our nephew, our great nephew, Laquan McDonald, as an inanimate object, to try to bolster the fact in their case that Laquan McDonald was the aggressor in this. They had went so far as to get the judge to agree that the word victim could not be used during the trial. However, certainly we know that Laquan is the victim. All of the evidence has shown that he is the victim and that Jason Van Dyke was the aggressor in this matter.
And obviously it has to be disturbing to you to see so many Chicago police officers coming to the courtroom supporting Jason Van Dyke, even though we know he lied, other officers lied. Some of them have been fired, some have retired as a result of what took place. And of course, we still know about those officers who went to a nearby Burger King and erased video as well. It has to be bothersome to see Chicago police ignoring what those officers did.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. And in fact, you're one of the few people that has brought that out. The prosecution did not use that evidence to bring about what we believe is going to be justice in this matter, because they had so much other evidence. But certainly what you're saying is the fact that there were tapes that was erased, there was police officers that lied. Mr. Camden, who was the spokesperson for the Chicago Police Department, lied. Initially, he came out and said that my nephew was aggressing the officers and they shot him once in the chest, and we found out that day that he had been shot 16 times, in fact, and when the tape actually came out, we discovered that he had not aggressed any officers. He was not trying to attack anyone. He was simply walking away from the officer.
All right, then. Well, Reverend Hunter, we certainly appreciate you joining us. We will, just like the Botham Jean case, we will continue to keep our attention on the Laquan McDonald case as well, because it is certainly important for our national audience and international audience to be aware of this trial. Thank you so very much.
Well, Mr. Martin, thank you. And I want to say, if I may, that one of the things that we are trying to do is not allow the death of Laquan to just be marginalized into Jason Van Dyke going to jail, because all across this country, Laquan McDonald's are dying at the hands of unjust police. What this police officer did was became judge, jury, and executioner. So what we decided was to look closer at this, and we discovered here in Chicago that we have a consent decree. But not only do we have a consent decree that's trying to come out, but we also have a FOP contract. Jason Van Dyke is studied saying that he feels like he was doing his job. When we looked at the FOP contract and listened to the testimony of the officers that came to testify against him, what we discovered was that Jason Van Dyke felt like he was just in doing what he was doing based on what the FOP contract was saying. And when we go to court, every day the FOP is there standing with Jason Van Dyke saying that he is right. What we discovered is that they are violating our civil right in this FOP contract in Chicago. And so we're looking into this because we believe that our 14th Amendment rights are being violated with the FOP contract that is taking place here in Chicago. And as Emmett Till's death birthed Rosa Parks, and Rosa Parks birthed the Montgomery boycott, and began to change Jim Crow laws across the country, we realized that that's what has to happen here with Laquan McDonald, because what they do is they align in their language. They're calling the FOP contract a contract. It is not a contract. It is, in fact, a law. And so we must change that law here in Illinois. And hopefully, once we're successful at doing that, the FOP contracts across this country will begin to change. And those Jim Crow laws that are there will be moved, and then we can get to having real police officers and not Patty Roller.
All right, Reverend Hunter, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right, folks, time to go to a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the impact of 1.6 million formerly incarcerated folks in Florida not being able to vote and the devastating impact it has on Black communities. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered, live from Los Angeles. I'll be back in a moment.
The rules may be colorblind, but people are not. Law professor Patricia Williams.
All right, folks, HBCU Giving Day, hashtag HBCU Giving Day. Of course, our effort to support historically Black colleges and universities. The university for today is Delaware State University. You can, of course, check them out, www.desu.edu, www.desu.edu. We certainly hope that you will share some of your dollars with them to ensure that our HBCUs remain strong and viable. And if you are a graduate of Delaware State, don't be so focused and excited about homecoming. Send a check back, whether it is $25, $50, $100, $250, $1,000, whatever the case may be. Be sure to support your university because that is critically important. Speaking of important, folks, there's going to be a major initiative on the ballot in Florida on November that could very well restore the voting rights to 1.6 million formerly incarcerated folks. Now, this is a huge issue because when you look across this country as we speak, there are 2.3 million people who are sitting in jail or prison. About 184,000 on the federal level, but the rest are in state and local jails. And many of these laws that prevent the formerly incarcerated from voting date back to the 1800s. Well, today, the Advancement Project released a new report detailing the impact of these laws on Black communities in Florida, and it shows how devastating it is. Joining us right now is the director of the Advancement Project, Judith Brown Dianis. Judith, how you doing? Okay, I can't hear Judith, folks, so let's just try it again. All right. Help me out again, folks. I want to be able to hear Judith. Okay, there you go. All right. Okay, so it's real faint, so if y'all could turn her audio up on your end, I would greatly appreciate it. Judith, when we look at just these numbers, 1.6 million folks who are coming back to communities, disproportionately, it's impacting Black folks more than any other group in Florida.
Right, that's right, Roland. There are, out of Floridians, 2 out of 10 Floridians are African American, but 4 out of 10 returning citizens are African American. So we know these are huge swaths of people who are returning citizens coming back to their communities. And what they're finding is when they get back to their neighborhoods that they are living in neighborhoods that have higher poverty rates, childhood poverty rates, higher unemployment, lower educational attainment. And at the end of the day, what we know that means is that these are folks who can't vote. If you can't vote, you don't have political voice. If you don't have political voice, that impacts your community and the ability to hold elected officials accountable.
And when we talk about those numbers, not only are they coming back, they're coming back not being able to find jobs. They're coming back not being able to access resources. So as a result, you now have individuals who are in communities who are being limited in what they're able to do. That has a ripple effect in other areas in those neighborhoods.
That's right. So in Florida in particular, the law isn't just about voting. What it does is that it takes away your civil rights. And so returning citizens also, when you lose your civil rights in Florida, that also means that there are certain jobs that you can't do because you can't get a license. So, for example, one of the leading spokespeople of this initiative in Florida, Desmond Meade, is someone who is a returning citizen who actually went to law school and graduated but cannot practice law because he is a person with a former felony conviction. So we know that, you know, it impacts jobs, it impacts community. If you can't vote, you can't have a say, for example, in school board elections. So you have children, but you have no say. So we have to put this in context, though. What is important is that, first of all, there's 6.1 million people across the country who cannot vote because of felony convictions. Florida is one of 4 states that allows a lifetime of disenfranchisement. So the problem is that we have these convictions. We know that mass incarceration has hurt Black communities and brown communities, but we know that also that the consequences of mass incarceration do not end when someone walks out of the prison doors. And so, unfortunately, our communities are feeling it. And so, at the end of the day, the report that we put out maps where those people are, the concentrations of those people. We need to find them. We need to make sure that their families are voting on their behalf, and hopefully we'll see a change in November.
And of course, the voting registration deadline is October 9th. And so folks are talking about vote, but you got to be registered to vote first. And one of the things that we've also been encouraging, Judith, the formerly incarcerated, is that even though they can't vote, they can still drive folks to the polls.
That's right.
They can still work hard to make this initiative happen. It needs 60% of all voters to pass it, to change the state constitution. This is, I don't think people really understand how earth-shattering this will be if this initiative is able to pass with 60+% of the vote.
Yep, Roland, if you go to our website, advancementproject.org, we actually have a map of the whole state of where those returning citizens are. And so you could imagine that it's going to change the state politically, but also that it's going to give people back their political voice. And we're going to be able to do things like change the criminal justice system. We're going to be able to change educational outcomes for our communities. And so this is really important. And the thing is that we need to make sure that Black folks turn out in huge numbers, because the people who are impacted are the people who don't have a voice. But their family members, their friends, their church members, all can vote for them.
I want to bring in our panel here, of course, Eugene, Avis, as well as Michael. Michael, this is an issue that we see all across this country. Judith, do this for a favor. Tell folks what you said this morning in the Tom Joyner Morning Show, that this dates back in Florida to the 1800s.
Yes. So Florida's law was actually passed in 1868. So you have 1865, free the slaves. And then right after, African Americans see this wave of laws that were put in place to disenfranchise newly freed African Americans. So Florida's was 1868. And while they did some changes after that, the impact of it has been the same on the Black community.
Michael, Avis, and Eugene, thoughts?
Well, first, I'd like to give Judy some props because she keeps using the term returning citizens. Thank you very much. I want to take some credit for that, Roland. As you know, Marion Barry and I wrote that legislation to change the term of ex-offenders to returning citizens. Obviously, may he rest in peace, Marion Barry and I thought it was time to change the stigma of what the title of ex-offenders meant as opposed to what it means to be a returning citizen. Relative to the legislation, elections have consequences. And until you have the kind of representative that you want representing you in your particular jurisdiction, these kind of laws are going to continue to fester. Washington, D.C., for example, is one of the more states that looks out for returning citizens. As soon as you get home, you can vote, how it should be anywhere else, especially if you are lucky enough to get a job, you're paying taxes. So why can't you vote? And as you mentioned, as Judy mentioned, getting your families involved is a part of making sure that elections have consequences.
I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, I was just going to say absolutely. However, what's very important about this law is that, quite frankly, it is not accidental. That this was something that was put in place as a backlash to the emancipation of enslaved Africans. And it's not accidental that a version of this still remains. It's actually very purposeful because it serves the purpose of trying to shift the dynamics of future elections. If you have 1 million plus people who cannot vote, and it's your belief that a large percentage of those persons will vote against your political interest or your politics, then it's in your interest to make sure that they cannot vote. And that's why it's so exciting to see now that we have the power in Florida to change the dynamics of that in terms of this next election. And if Florida is successful in flipping the script, so to speak, and making sure that returning citizens are able to regain their right to vote, I'm hopeful that this will be a blueprint that can be copied in other states so that felony disenfranchisement and other measures that have been put in place all across this country to depress the vote specifically of the Black community can be struck down one right after the other.
I agree 100% with Michael and Avis. I'm actually of the belief that you shouldn't lose the right to vote when you go to, or when you are incarcerated. You don't lose your right to free speech. You shouldn't lose your right to vote. But you know, the Advancement Project that's going on in Florida is absolutely amazing. I hope that the initiative passes this cycle. If 1/10 of that, 1.6 million voted in 2016, Donald Trump doesn't win Florida.
Absolutely.
And so, in Maryland, we've taken a step further. We've taken that step of giving felons, giving newly returned citizens the right to vote back, and are taking steps to deal with licensing, especially when it comes to occupational licenses.
And Judith, to that particular point, look, if this is able to pass, this is going to change politics up and down the political ladder in Florida, because look, you're not going to have people who are going to be so quick to run on I'm Mr. and Mrs. Law and Order. They're going to have to consider what those folks think. And when you're talking about adding 1.6 million people to the voting rolls, that changes the entire state.
That's right. This is no little thing. I mean, of course, it's been in place since 1868. So it's no little thing. And what we're doing is that we are part of the coalition that is there working on this issue. But we're not just talking about this initiative. We're getting prepared for winning. We're getting prepared for what we're going to do on the other side. So we're building out chapters of returning citizens across the state with the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, because when you win things, then you got to be ready to step into the power that you have. And so we want to make sure that returning citizens have a say. So you could imagine all of criminal justice issues will be on the table, and people will be voting around that issue. 1.6 million people who will have a say about how the incarceration beast has been devastating our communities. And so this is a big deal. And as Avid said, this is not just Florida, right? We will see a sweep. If it happens in Florida, believe me, we're going back to Virginia, where we were able to get a big win through the governor, but we need a constitutional amendment in Virginia. So we're just hoping that we're going to be able to get Black folks out to make sure that they turn out to be the voice for those people who don't have a voice in our system. Because if they do, all things will change.
And Roland,
first of all, Michael, go ahead, because while you're doing that, I'm texting Sheena Mead as well as Desmond Mead.
Good.
Of course, they're leading this initiative, and new polling literally just came out. So, Michael, while you're talking, I'm telling Sheena to send the polling data ASAP so I can read it right now. So, Michael, you go ahead and make your comment, and then I'm waiting for this email.
Well, part of the challenge is with criminal justice reform, sentencing reform, prison reform, whatever you'd like to call it, is sometimes there's a stigma attached, clearly, and Judy knows the statistics better than all of us, about how many folks that impacts, whether it's to Black and brown people. However, there are large amounts of white folks too. And the message has to be much more encompassing, because the opponents to this will make it a Black and brown issue, which then a lot of white constituency groups will then want to buck that. But if they know their nephew also can't vote when they come back to home, and sometime somewhere in Kentucky or West Virginia, they're going to fight just as hard. So we have to make sure, yes, we know who it impacts. We know about the statistics. However, it has to be a more encompassing argument in creating different communities.
I would say that, I work with Sheena as part of the Black Women's Roundtable, and they have been very strategic and purposeful about creating a universal message around this, precisely to the point that you were just making. They were mentioning even when they were having the petitions to get this on the ballot, they were actually going to Trump rallies and getting people to sign the petition. And so it has, I'm very interested in seeing this new polling data, but I know with previous polling data, it has been something that has been very much supported, not only in Black and brown communities, but I think to a lot of people's surprises, a significant proportion of the white community is in favor of it as well.
Right. Because they're impacted too, and also, most people believe in second chances. Like that's what they say about this amendment. This is the Second Chances Amendment, and whether you're a religious leader, the Koch brothers are entering into the scene to be supportive. Where we thought that they would just be about the reform issues, criminal justice reform.
Judith, hold on one second. So Sheena, the email is taking too long, so I'm actually live right now. So why don't you just tell me what the new polling data says? I actually have you on the digital show. So what does it say?
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks, Roland. We just released today that we are still polling at 74% across the state, holding with 74% of voters still saying yes, that they support Amendment 4.
So you're polling at so right now you're polling at 74% across the state.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And okay, so gotcha. All right, so I will look. Go ahead.
And and so I just want to highlight that right now we have over 88% support from Democrats that strongly support this initiative, and we're still close to 60% of conservatives that still support this initiative.
So 88% of Democrats are in support of this initiative, and about 60% of Republicans.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, Sheena, we're definitely going to have you and Desmond back on. Thank you for giving us the latest polling data. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
All right. So there y'all go.
Listen, I would say this. That should scare, on the flip side, the crap out of every single Republican running in Florida that's running on this super law and order. I think, that poll right there, Judy mentioned earlier, the Koch brothers are behind this, Freedom Partners supporting this, Mark Holden and crew. DeSantis, I think that poll right there shows, how and why, DeSantis is down against Gillum. When you go out there and you try to scare people and you make it about, oh my gosh, the black candidate is going to let all the violent black people out, going to come out and terrorize your neighborhood, and you get numbers like that where 60% of conservatives are supporting Second Chance and 80% of Democrats, you cannot be a Christian conservative and not be in support of giving folk a second chance. That is literally what the entire basis of the Christian religion is on, second chances. So I think the polling is not necessarily shocking, and I think election day is going to be a good day here.
So I want to ask, I got the four of you here. I want to ask you this real quick. First of all, I really don't care about Kanye West because I think he's an idiot. Let's just cut to the chase. I do believe he's off his meds. I do believe he has some serious, he has an issue when it comes to mental illness. But I got to ask you this here. So Charlie Kirk with Total Priorities USA, him and that other crazy nut, Candace Owens, the two people who love challenging everybody else to a debate, but they have been refusing now for going on 3 months to actually debate me. I told them, I don't need any backup, any help. I'll make both of y'all together. Just let me know when y'all want to roll. Anytime, any day, anywhere. Doesn't matter.
They scared.
So Charlie Kirk sends this tweet out saying that Kanye West and Candace Owens together, they're changing the culture and the dialogue. Democrats should be scared to death. If Kanye West is their secret weapon, y'all already lost.
For real. Ain't that the truth?
It's crazy. It's sickening. we can't look to Kanye for our political commentary or to be a thought leader. But when it comes to, I mean, I think it's pretty much established that, you know, Candace and Charlie and Turning Point are trash. They run an extremely racist organization. I mean, there are multiple articles about, you know, their you know, some of the folk they've hired, their leadership they hired. You know, they quietly got rid of Crystal, and then Jeannie Thomas went ahead and hired her, as if, you know, she isn't like an open racist. But you know, if Kanye, as a conservative, conservative Candace, Kanye, or Charlie, none of them speak for us. You know, they are Trumplicans. You know, they are nationalists. They are big government folk. And listen, you know, I told you, Roland. Every time you tweet that out, I at you and I tweet you and I say, listen, I could tag team you with that.
See, I mean, Kanye.
No. I want them to know I don't need no help.
I know you want to know you need help, but
we know you.
I'm on your side.
See, I mean, Kanye and Trump have one thing in common, which is they are both marketing geniuses. You know, like, I don't like to give credit to Trump about anything, you know, but he really does know how to use a bully pulpit, and I do mean bully by that, right? But he also, like, the two of them understand the moment, and Kanye just wants to be in the news, and so he's able to say these things that actually have us talking about it when we don't care. But that's what he does.
He does have us talking, but he doesn't have us buying. That's the thing.
Right.
I mean, I saw a statistic today that the second week of his sales has actually dropped tremendously.
I know, that kid goes, man.
The main core of his audience is insulted, is offended, is repulsed by him, and he's not going to have those. He's not going to have those
get rid of the
Trumpers buying his
13th
album.
Amendment.
Yeah.
Boy, have you read?
I think, you know, Kanye's he's out of control. He's slightly misguided. I think I might know where he's been going with it. You know, with the whole.
He watched Ava DuVernay's film. He's like,
give her the whole thing. The whole thing needs to go.
At this point, my only thing is, you know, where is Yandhi? I was promised a whole entire album on my birthday Saturday, and here we are Monday, and the album still has not dropped.
Roland.
You know, where is Yandhi? That is the only thing I need to hear from Kanye
Michael,
right
go
now.
ahead.
Well, I think it's even more basic than all the other commentators. They're exactly right. But again, it's much more basic than that. I think he is mad that his wife makes more than him. And he has to figure out a way to get back in the mix so his check is bigger than hers in the house. And I think that's what this is coming down to. He's as Judy mentioned, he's into shock media, and this is all shocking to wear that hat. But basically, he's second rate in his own house.
I mean, the thing is,
and there's nothing wrong with that.
I mean, I think
nothing wrong with a woman making more than a man.
Kanye Kardashian knows that he's not that Yeezy shoes are not going to outsell lip kits and lipstick.
First of all, when you show your ass up to a wedding and some damn house slippers, you need to be you need serious help right there, because it looked like a damn fool and they didn't fit. All right, y'all. That's enough of that, because I mean, I'm just really. But here's the other piece. Kanye, I'd be more than happy to have a conversation with you too. You want some of this?
Oh Lord.
Would you like to have that conversation, Kanye?
He's not ready.
I mean,
for that.
Kanye, we're more. I mean, in fact, Kanye, Charlie Kirk, and Candace. I take on all three of y'all at the same time.
I'm with it.
I won't even take a water break.
Roland's with the smoke.
I'm telling you, it's gonna look like the Matrix with Neo when he was like this here. All the bullets were coming at him and they were just falling like, this ain't gonna happen. So I'm more than happy to have a discussion, a debate with them anytime, any day.
Well,
y'all
they're
just
coming to
tweet
town.
about.
They'll be here in 3 weeks.
Oh, Kanye?
Candace and Charlie.
Oh.
Okay.
Well, we're looking
It's real
forward to
simple.
that.
Candace and Charlie? Come on. All right, y'all, going to a break right now. We come back. We're going to talk about white supremacy. One guy who used to be a white supremacist, now he realizes, the hell was I thinking? We'll talk to a Pulitzer Prize-winning author who wrote a book about this gentleman. Folks, this is Roland Martin Unfiltered. Back in a moment. Those white supremacists are having a field day as a result of Donald Trump being in the White House. He is playing to their concerns. He is pushing their buttons, and they are happy to see the orange one at 1600 Pennsylvania. But there's a new book out that details a former white nationalist who realized that it made no sense whatsoever what he was doing. The book is called Rising Out of Hatred, The Awakening of a Former White Nationalist. It is by Eli Saslow. He's a winner of the Pulitzer Prize, and he details the story of Derek Black, who grew up at the epicenter of white nationalism. Eli, welcome to Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Thanks so much for having me. Glad to be here.
So these stories are always quite interesting because we see these interviews and we see these largely white men, young white men who are angry, who are bitter. They have what I call white fear because they can't handle this changing America. What made this individual so interesting that you wanted to make him the center of this book?
Well, I mean, a big part of it is that Derek Black was not just a single racist. He was the heir apparent to this movement and was disastrous in mainstreaming a lot of these ideas. I mean, Derek, by the time he was 22 years old, had been elected to public office in Florida, had a daily show on the radio spreading this awful ideology, had built a white pride site for kids, spreading these ideas to more than 1 million kids who came to the page, did real and profound damage. His father had been head of the KKK for a decade. His godfather, David Duke, is one of the most notorious racial zealots of our time. And Derek was the person who was supposed to lead this movement before going through a radical transformation. So I think that made his case a little bit different.
And you said something that was interesting there, that he was elected to public office. People keep acting as if these white supremacists are walking around with hoods and burning crosses and they're using broken English. No, it has become far more sophisticated, and many of them are running as Republicans. They're pushing those particular buttons. And when you hear Trump talk about illegal immigration, that's one of their buttons. When you hear them talk about the changing demographics of America, that's another issue that is scaring them to death. And so they have really become mainstream over the past 25 years.
No question. I mean, I think it's comforting for us sometimes to think that these are ideas held just by a small number of fringe extremists. The unfortunate truth is that right now in the United States, a huge number of people have really problematic and racist ideas because these are ideas that are embedded in our country and what America has been. Polls consistently show that about 1/3 of white people in America believe that they experience more discrimination than people of color or Jews. The facts of that are wildly inaccurate. Every possible measure that we have says that's not true. But by playing to that real sense of grievance that exists in part of this country, these ideas have real power. That's the platform that Derek ran on when he was running for office by saying, we need less signs, fewer signs in Spanish. We need to build a wall on the border. We need to prioritize European-only immigration. We need to focus on crime in the inner cities. And now we see that those talking points get people elected at much higher levels as well.
And you talk about the transformation of Derek. What started it?
So Derek went to college. I mean, he'd grown up really sort of indoctrinated with a lot of these ideas. Since the time he was a little kid, he'd been a big figure in this movement. The first time that he sort of got out of it after being homeschooled for a lot of years was going to this little college in Florida called New College of Florida. Derek went when he was 22 years old. It was the best school in Florida, the cheapest school. It just seemed to make sense for him. And he went there and he began bumping into people who were often the victims of his prejudices, whose ideas about race were entirely different than his own. And they began to challenge him through first protest by civil resistance, sort of shutting down the campus to make clear that his ideas were not welcome there, through debating him on the facts. And I think it's comforting to know that all of the facts are on the side of the anti-racist. White nationalism is based on false science, false ideas about IQ differentials, criminality, all of it's wrong. And the students began debating Derek based on these ideas and also building relationships with him that did enable him to begin seeing beyond the prejudices to the people and to the humanity. All of those things began wearing away at some of his ideas.
And when you look at what's happening now, we saw what took place in Charlottesville. We see, of course, Bob Woodward's book where Trump said that was the worst speech he gave. The reality is Donald Trump is emboldening these white nationalists. He is pushing the buttons that they have long sought. And the reality is when you see them doing robocalls for Ron DeSantis against Andrew Gillum in Florida, when you see them openly embracing Donald Trump, the Republican Party can say, oh, they disavow that all they want to, but they are saying things that these white nationalists want to hear.
No question. I mean, I don't think the ideas of the white nationalist movement and the ideas of a mainstream political party in this country have ever been so aligned or so close together. And for that reason, I think we've seen a lot of active collaboration, whether that's Donald Trump retweeting white nationalist Twitter accounts and spreading myths about white genocide, or whether it's all these white nationalists like Jared Taylor, David Duke, whoever else, encouraging people who listen to their radio shows to go out and volunteer for these mainstream conservative Republican campaigns, because, as David Duke says, you will meet people who have the same ideas about race as you do. There's a real degree of collaboration right now, and I think white nationalists feel not only emboldened, but more powerful than they have in decades, because their ideas are being carried forth into the public space by some of the primary political actors of our time.
And the thing is not just even this idea of white nationalists. It's individuals who will never call themselves a white nationalist, who will never call themselves a racist, but who hold those beliefs. I've talked to them and they'll say, oh, no, that's not me. But the things that they're saying, the things that they're believing in, they're voting on, and in the case of Derek, the things they're passing on to their children, that's how white supremacy and that's how white nationalism continues to evolve in this American society 399 years after the first 21 Africans arrived in Virginia in 1619.
Yeah, no question. And I think, again, the thing that makes this scary is that it is endemic to the United States. Many of our systems, much of the world that we're living in, the country that we're living in, is still based on white supremacist ideas. That's in the fabric of our founding. And so white nationalists have continued to propagate these myths by going around and spreading their rhetoric to white Americans who don't like to be identified as racist, but who hold a lot of these really problematic beliefs. Derek, when he was a white nationalist, he would always say that the way he recruited people is he would go around and look for people who were saying things like, I'm not racist, but. And as soon as he heard that, he knew that he was talking to somebody who likely agreed with a lot of his platform. I think that's also how we've seen, Donald Trump spread a lot of his ideas by speaking to a very similar audience.
Well, and of course, when you have people like Steve Bannon, who says that Breitbart.com was all about the alt-right, a new name for white supremacists, white nationalists. When you have a Stephen Miller, who is sitting in the White House, a major position, setting policy, the reality, and Richard Spencer said when he was at Duke that who was his hero? Stephen Miller. Bottom line is they are still setting policy here in the United States. Final comment, Eli.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think they're still setting policy in the United States. And I think the key is to look closely at these policies and see the roots. I mean, it was David Duke and the Klan who first went to the southern border in the United States, bringing the national media with them in the 1970s and popularizing the idea of building a wall. A lot of these ideas have really dark, racist pasts. And I think if you look past the rhetoric, you'll see a history that's bathed in bloodshed that really needs to be confronted and examined.
The book is called Rising Out of Hatred, The Awakening of a Former White Nationalist by Eli Saslow. Eli, we certainly appreciate you joining us here on Roland Martin Unfiltered.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
All right, folks. This is one of the reasons why we have this show, because we are willing to have the conversations others are afraid of. When you look at this show, we talk about Botham Jean, giving you the update of that particular case, our cameras being there in Dallas. We were the only media entity that actually live streamed that rally. Local cameras were there, local media was there, but no other local or national outlet decided to live stream that entire community forum. Of course, when we also the daily coverage of the Laquan McDonald case, the Florida restoration case. Again, the fact that we can immediately call Sheena and Desmond Meade, getting that updated information is important. This is why Roland Martin Unfiltered matters, because we have to be able to control the narrative and tell our own story from our own perspective, which is why we want you to go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com and become a charter member of our Bring the Funk fan club. Folks, the bottom line is here. It cost having a camera operator there on Saturday. It cost us to live stream that, and we've got to fund our freedom. It's as simple as that, because the reality is when you look at the things that we cover 5 days a week, even on the weekends, you're not going to see this stuff covered on a consistent basis by any of the cable or broadcast networks. We must be willing to tell our own story. So we want you to go to the website, RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can use Square, you can use PayPal, and you can actually join our club. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans over the course of a year to contribute a minimum of $50. It'll cover you for the whole year. If you want to give more, that's great. Some have done so, upwards of $500+. Others have given less. It doesn't matter. Every dollar counts, because it is about being able to tell our story and control our narrative. Big thanks to Eugene, to Michael, and to Avis for being on our panel today. Thank you, Judith Brown Dianis, as well, with the Advancement Project. And Sheena and Desmond, thank you for giving us the first numbers on that new poll coming out of Florida with regards to the proposition on the ballot in November. Folks, do not forget, October 9th is a deadline in many places across the country. Register to vote. Check your status. And remember, even if you say I registered before, it's nothing wrong registering again, because we want to make sure there are nothing happening at the ballot box that's going to screw you when it comes to placing your vote. Folks, I will be broadcasting tomorrow from New York City. That's right, going west, back east. I shall see you guys tomorrow. Have a great evening. Holla!